Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you're having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. Last year I had a lunch thief at my office job. Around the 10th time reporting to HR about someone stealing my lunch, company policy required reporting every third incident, I was fuming because nothing was being done. I still had to waste money buying replacement lunches from the overpriced cafeteria. During my annual physical in March 2023, I was complaining to Dr. Martinez about the situation. He got this mischievous grin and asked, "Having digestive issues lately?" "No, why?" I replied, confused. He scribbled out a prescription explaining, "This is a powerful prescription-strength laxative. Instructions are to mix thoroughly with food for optimal results." He winked, and that's when I caught on to his suggestion. I wish I could say the thief had an accident, but what happened was even better. They ate my turkey club sandwich with special herb-seasoned mayo. About an hour after lunch, I marched straight to Sarah in HR with 2 complaints. My lunch was stolen again, I stated calmly, and this time they also took my medication. Sarah sighed. Another lunch theft, and medication was in the bag? Yes, I explained. I've been having some digestion problems. My doctor prescribed a strong laxative and specifically instructed me to mix it with my lunch. Sarah's face went pale. You what? Just following doctor's orders, I said with a shrug. Mix my prescribed medication right into my lunch. Since stealing prescription medication is a criminal offense, they called the police. They found Mike Thompson, a supervisor from the marketing department, locked in the 3rd-floor bathroom, groaning in agony. He was livid and started yelling about me poisoning him. I just looked at him and asked, "What made you think that lunch had your name on it?" Then added, "And now I'm without my prescribed medication for my condition." The look on his face was priceless when he realized how badly he'd messed up. He clammed up fast and waited for his lawyer, from what I heard later. My old college buddy Jake took over his position after he left. These days I enjoy my lunches in peace, and word is Thompson found work in another city after paying his fines and doing community service. The next one is an entitled People's Story. I inherited 15 acres of forested land from my grandfather back in 2019. The property is located about 30 minutes outside of town in a rural area, and I'd always loved spending time there as a kid. My grandfather used it mainly for hiking and camping, and he'd built a small cabin near the entrance where he'd stay on weekends. After he passed away, I decided to keep the property exactly as it was, a peaceful forest retreat. The property is clearly marked with no trespassing signs and has bright orange survey markers at all the corners. There's also a chain-link fence running along most of the perimeter, except for about 200 feet where it borders a steep ravine. I visit at least twice a month to check on things and do basic maintenance. Everything was fine until last spring when I drove up one Saturday morning and noticed tire tracks leading into my property from the neighbor's land. Following them through the trees, I came upon something that made my blood boil. A brand new 12 by 16 foot shed sitting right there on my land, about 50 feet in from the property line. The shed looked expensive, one of those pre-built Amish ones with vinyl siding and architectural shingles. It had clearly been delivered recently, as there were still wooden blocks under the corners where it had been lowered off a trailer. What really got me was that someone had already started landscaping around it, putting down gravel and planting flowers. I immediately pulled out my phone and started taking pictures and video of everything. The shed, the tire tracks, the property markers, all of it. Then I called the police to file a report about the trespassing and unauthorized construction. While waiting for the officers to arrive, my neighbor Karen came marching across her yard toward me. I'd only met her once before when she moved in about a year ago. She was probably in her late 40s, dressed in expensive athleisure wear with perfectly styled blonde hair. "Can I help you with something?" she called out in an overly sweet voice that set my teeth on edge. "Yes, actually. This shed is on my property and needs to be removed immediately," I replied firmly but politely. Karen's fake smile didn't waver. "Oh no, you must be mistaken. This is my land. I had it surveyed before putting the shed here." I pulled out my phone and showed her photos of the clearly visible property markers. "These orange posts mark the boundary line. Your property ends 50 feet that way," I said, pointing toward her house. "This shed is definitely on my land." "Those old markers don't mean anything," she scoffed. "I paid good money to have this surveyed. My property extends to that ravine over there. Always has." I could feel my blood pressure rising but kept my cool. That's incorrect. I have the official survey documents and deed showing exactly where the property line is. This shed needs to be removed. Listen here, Karen's voice turned nasty. I paid $8,000 for this shed and another $2,000 for site preparation and delivery. It's staying right where it is. This is my property and I'll call the police if you don't leave immediately. I had to laugh at that. I've already called them, actually. They're on their way to document the trespassing and unauthorized construction. Karen's face turned red. How dare you? Do you know who I am? My husband is a very successful real estate developer. We'll sue you into oblivion if you don't back off right now. Looking forward to it, I replied calmly. Please don't come onto my property again without permission. 2 sheriff's deputies arrived about 15 minutes later. Karen immediately launched into a dramatic performance about how I was harassing her and trying to steal her land. The officers were professional but clearly not buying her act. I showed them my deed, survey documents, and photos of the property markers. They took statements from both of us and lots of pictures. One deputy told me it was clearly a civil matter, but they would document everything for court purposes. The next day, I sent Karen a certified letter formally demanding she remove the shed within 7 days or face legal action. I included copies of the relevant property documents and surveys. She responded by having her lawyer send me a threatening letter claiming adverse possession and demanding I cease and desist all harassment. That's when I knew this wasn't going to be resolved easily. I contacted a real estate attorney who specialized in property disputes. After reviewing all my documentation, he assured me this was a straightforward case of trespassing and unauthorized construction. He recommended we file suit immediately for removal of the shed and damages. Over the next few weeks, things got increasingly hostile. Karen started using the shed regularly, driving her golf cart across my property to access it. She even had the nerve to install security cameras pointing at it, on my trees. When I removed the cameras, she called the police claiming I'd vandalized her property. Fortunately, I had recorded myself taking them down and explaining to the camera exactly why I was doing so. One evening, I caught her teenage sons riding ATVs through my forest, tearing up the underbrush and scaring away wildlife. When I confronted them, they claimed their mom said it was their property and they could ride wherever they wanted. I had to install game cameras and no trespassing signs every 50 feet along that section to document their continued violations. The final straw came when I discovered Karen had hired landscapers to clear a 30-foot wide path from her property to the shed, cutting down several mature oak trees in the process. I immediately called my lawyer and the police. The responding officer actually arrested one of the landscapers for criminal damage to property after he became belligerent and threatened me. My lawyer filed suit the next day seeking immediate removal of the shed, restoration of the property to its original condition, damages for the destroyed trees, which are typically valued at $1,000 to $5,000 each, legal fees and court costs, punitive damages for willful trespassing. We also filed for an emergency temporary restraining order to prevent Karen from accessing or modifying the property further while the case was pending. The judge granted it after seeing the documentation of escalating violations. Karen's response was to hire an expensive law firm from the city who tried to bury us in paperwork. They filed countless motions arguing everything from adverse possession to prescriptive easements to boundary by acquiescence. But they had one major problem. All of these legal theories require years of continuous use or possession. Karen had only lived there for a year. The court ordered a new survey, which of course confirmed exactly what my documents showed. The shed was entirely on my property. Karen's lawyer tried arguing that her previous survey showed different boundaries, but they mysteriously couldn't produce this alleged survey when the judge demanded to see it. Your Honor, my attorney addressed the court, the defendant claims she had a survey done showing different property lines, yet has provided no evidence this survey ever existed. Meanwhile, we have provided the official county surveys from 1965, 1988, and 2019, all showing identical boundaries. The defendant knowingly constructed an expensive storage building on clearly marked property that doesn't belong to her, then willfully damaged that property further when asked to remove it. Karen's testimony didn't help her case. She came across as entitled and evasive. Well, I just assumed that land was part of our property since it's on our side of the ravine. It's not like he was using it for anything except trees. Did you check the property records before building the shed? Asked my lawyer. I didn't think I needed to. My husband develops real estate, so I know how these things work. Did you see the orange survey markers clearly showing the property line? Those old things? They could have been put there by anyone. Did you have an actual survey done as you claimed? I don't recall exactly. My husband handled all that. When her husband testified, he threw her under the bus completely. I told her multiple times to check the property lines before doing anything. She just decided she knew better and went ahead with it. I wasn't involved in any of this. The judge was not amused by any of it. His ruling came down hard. Karen had to remove the shed within 30 days. She had to restore the property to its original condition, including having a professional arborist plant replacement trees. She had to pay damages of $3,500 per destroyed tree. There were 8 of them. She had to pay all my legal fees and court costs. She had to pay $10,000 in punitive damages for willful trespassing. A permanent injunction was issued preventing her from entering my property. Total judgment came to over $50,000. Karen burst into tears and started screaming about how unfair it was. Her lawyer had to physically escort her from the courtroom, but it wasn't over yet. The 30-day deadline came and went with no action from Karen. My attorney filed for contempt of court. The day before that hearing, Karen tried a new tactic. She listed the shed for sale online and claimed she couldn't remove it until it sold. The judge wasn't having any of it. He authorized me to have the shed removed at Karen's expense and put a lien on her property for the judgment amount. I hired a company that specialized in shed moving. They came out the next week and relocated it to a storage facility. Karen totally lost it when she came home to find the shed gone. She called the police claiming it was stolen, despite having been in court when the judge authorized its removal. The officers just handed her a copy of the court order and left. That evening, she started posting all over neighborhood Facebook groups about how I'd stolen her expensive shed and was trying to bankrupt her family. I hadn't planned to share the court documents publicly, but her lies forced my hand. I posted copies of the judgment and property surveys showing exactly what had happened. The neighborhood response was devastating for her. People she'd considered friends started sharing stories of her entitled behavior and schemes to take advantage of others. It turned out she had a history of trying to grab land and bully people into giving her what she wanted. One neighbor wrote, "She tried claiming our fence was on her property last year and demanded we move it. When we showed her the survey, she accused us of forging it. Some people never learn." Another commented, "She told us we had to cut down our tree because leaves were falling in her yard. When we refused, she tried to poison it. Karma finally caught up with her." The real estate development company where her husband worked as a VP also caught wind of the situation. They weren't happy about being associated with someone who illegally built structures on other people's property. He was asked to resign to avoid scandal. Karen put their house up for sale a month later. The listing described it as a must-sell situation with motivated sellers. They ended up taking a $100,000 loss just to get out quickly. Before they moved, Karen's husband came over to apologize. "I'm sorry about all this. I tried to tell her she was wrong, but she wouldn't listen. She's always been like this, thinking rules don't apply to her and she can just take what she wants. Maybe losing the house will finally teach her a lesson." I almost felt bad for him. Almost. The property has been restored now. The new trees are growing well and the grass is coming back where the gravel was removed. The tire tracks and ATV damage have mostly healed. Every now and then I find the old survey markers and smile, remembering how a simple orange post prevented someone from stealing my land. The shed? It's still sitting at that storage facility, racking up fees. Karen never paid to have it moved again or claimed it. After 6 months, the facility took possession and sold it at auction. Ironically, I heard it sold for less than what it cost to move it there. Last I heard, Karen and her husband divorced and she moved several states away to live with her sister. The neighbors threw a party when she left. I was invited but politely declined. I had some trees to plant. The total cost to Karen ended up being $8,000 for the shed, lost $2,000 for initial site work, wasted, $28,000 for destroyed trees, $15,000 in legal fees, $10,000 punitive damages, $3,000 for property restoration, $100,000 loss on house sale, 1 marriage. All because she couldn't be bothered to check property lines or respect other people's rights. Sometimes the most expensive lessons are the ones we have to learn the hard way. These days, I make sure to refresh the orange paint on those survey markers every spring. You never know when another Karen might come along thinking they can just take what they want. But at least now I have a great story to tell them about why that's a bad idea. The next one is a petty revenge story. That was required for my major. The rest were just random electives to fulfill the minimum unit requirements to graduate. I'd noticed the name of the professor I was assigned to and instantly felt dread. I'd had him during my freshman year for another required course, and let's just say, he wasn't a pleasant human being. Constantly on a power trip, would dock a percentage of your grade for every class missed or were late for, and had no problem yelling/talking down to you in front of the entire class. I ended up getting sick during the beginning of the semester, so I had to miss his first class. Since it met twice a week, I made sure to show up to the Thursday class. The professor gave me a look when I walked in, so I introduced myself and explained I'd missed the Tuesday class BC. I'd been sick, thinking that was the end of it. Nope. He called me over after the class got dismissed, and in a sinisterly delighted way, told me that since I missed his first class on the first week, that he was allowed to drop me and that I would have to take the class next semester, The university policy was that if you missed 50% of class meetings during the first 2 weeks, the professor could drop you from the course, assuming they cared enough to take attendance. So if a class met 4 times in the first 2 weeks and you missed 2 of them, you could get involuntarily dropped. I went straight to our department's building and there was an admin sitting there right by the elevator. I told her what the situation was, basically repeating my understanding of the policy to her. She nodded and said that was correct. Right then, the elevator door opened and my professor walked up. I said in a sinisterly delighted way, "Will you please explain the policy to my professor? I don't think he's very familiar with it." The look on the professor's face still makes me chuckle to this day, and I ended up passing his class as a B. The next one is a malicious compliances story. A few months ago, a new business investor at work came on board as a manager, and he has been an absolute hard ass. He is cracking down on anything he considers to be a waste of time, and he is unforgiving. After a week of watching us work, he and the other managers held a company-wide meeting to iron out some wrinkles in the company that he observed since he started. It wasn't an open dialogue, though. In fact, that's one of the things he wanted to wrinkle out. It was essentially just 20 min of, "It's our way or the highway, deal with it." The line, "If we want your input, we will ask for it, period," really stuck with me, though, and it was made abundantly clear afterwards that it was directed at me. The company has had a big problem recently with employee turnover, and I was in the position to know why, since I interact with everyone through my role. Essentially, people are quitting because the work they were doing wasn't what they signed up to do. The phrase, "If I knew this is what I would be doing, I wouldn't have accepted the job," was a common sentiment. They accepted the job under the impression that they would be serving customers, answering emails and phone calls, general customer service stuff, but instead they spend about 90% of their time in a hot warehouse packing online orders over and over again. I shared that with management. I let them know what the people leaving were saying in case they wanted to take that into account moving forward. They just thanked me and I left, but the new manager hated that so much that he decided to make a meeting about giving them unsolicited advice. They spoke with me privately afterwards and referred back to when I told them about what the quitting employees said, and they told me that the way they interpreted that was that I was implying that they were being deceitful when hiring people. I told them, no, I don't think that at all. I was just relaying what those people were saying about how they felt. They didn't care. They doubled down and said again, "If we want your input, we will ask for it, period." That's how I knew it was directed at me. I asked them for clarification, like what constitutes advice or input. And the new boss said, "Unless you are asking us a question about the work you're supposed to be doing, we don't want to hear it. We don't want your opinion on how you think we should handle situations. We don't want your ideas on how you think the business can be better run. And we don't want gossip about what other people are saying about us. Just focus on your job." Fine then. I'll roll with that, no problem. I've worked for them for years and they always appreciated my ideas, opinions, and input until that point. But hey, if they don't want my input anymore, that's their choice and I'll respect that. I knew it was just the new boss saying that stuff since this sort of attitude with them only started when he did, but the others either agreed with him or were too intimidated to disagree. Either way, whatever, I'll comply with their request. Since then, the problem hasn't been fixed. We've had 2 more people come and go, both of them because they didn't sign up for this. Shocker. A third one started about 5 weeks ago, and he has taken his frustration in a different direction. I've overheard him complaining over and over again to other people about how he didn't sign on to stand around in a hot warehouse for hours packing online orders, but instead of quitting like everyone else, he just got angrier and angrier. And then he hulked out. I was upstairs at my desk when I started to hear smashing. I went down to the warehouse to see what was going on, and this guy was taking customers' packages and smashing them out of frustration. A few others in the warehouse gathered and just watched in amusement. It was like something out of a cartoon. The new boss heard the commotion and came down. Long story short, the guy was fired and I was asked if I knew why he flipped out. I said, I don't know what happened exactly to cause him to flip out, but I know that for weeks he's been complaining about not signing up to work in a hot warehouse for hours. Maybe he just reached a tipping point about it, not sure. And he said, well, why didn't you tell us? So, of course, I said, because last time I told you that employees were complaining about that, you accused me of implying that you were being deceitful when hiring them. Then you told me to stop gossiping. He had to eat crow a bit on that, which was just so ducking delicious to witness, but I was also reprimanded for taking the request too literally, and he accused me of being petty. Whatever though, I don't care, because I had to adjust the stock levels for the goods that had to be replaced, and they lost about $10,000 in the rampage, some of the items that were smashed worth $2,000 each. Learning that made the whole thing worthwhile. Perhaps enjoying that does make me petty. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.